To recover wild salmon, everyone needs to be on board. We need all hands on deck. And so it's not just scientists, it's not just decision makers that have influence. Like everyone from all walks of life can make an impact in recovering wild salmon and conserving them for future generations. And so whether you're, a engineer, if you're a stay-at-home mom, if you're a dog walker, like literally anyone can support wild salmon through their various areas of expertise and experience. And so that's what I would really encourage, both for young people and people, of any generation, is that like we really do need all hands on deck. No matter what your background is, you can be involved in this if you want to be. I never anticipated I would be so passionate about fish. I was always like, I loved big carnivores, big cats, like classic megafauna lover. And then I think the more time you spend on the coast of whether it's BC or Alaska, Washington, Oregon, any of the salmon bearing areas, that it's just impossible not to love salmon because they're so amazing and they're so important. My name is Kristen Walters. I'm a biologist for Raincoast Conservation Foundation, and I currently live on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation in BC. My work with Raincoast is quite interdisciplinary in the way that we really work on a wide spectrum of issues facing wild salmon in the Fraser River. And that can go, from contaminants that are, their habitat is contaminated, to looking at intergovernmental relations and collaborating with Indigenous nations on their rights and supporting their rights and title and implementing ecosystem-based management frameworks. And so I wear many hats, which is often the case when you work for an NGO, but I really, really appreciate that because I have such a wide spectrum of work, I've been able to cultivate different skill sets that aren't necessarily like typical to science. So having to write, like, storytelling is really important, I think, for communicating to the public, or writing reports for government, or working with nations. And so there's really like the human dimension to conservation that I think often isn't as focused on in the sciences, but is super essential. And so I really, really appreciate that in my role, I get to collaborate with a lot of people and really support folks that are in other fields, drawing on their own skill sets to address challenges. And I think as I mentioned, my kind of interdisciplinary background through my education has really supported me doing that. The biggest piece of work that I've been working on now is multiple years in the making, but it's through a working group here in BC called the Lower Fraser Working Group. And it is composed of myself on behalf of Raincoast, some researchers from the University of British Columbia, the Lower Fraser Fisheries Alliance, which is an Indigenous-led organization that represents 30 different nations in the Fraser Valley region, as well as West Coast Environmental Law, which is a nonprofit law organization based out of Vancouver. And so we all come together with these different skill sets and lenses to look at pathways towards implementing ecosystem-based and Indigenous-led management frameworks for salmon habitat in the Fraser region. And so a lot of our work has been supporting the Lower Fraser Fisheries Alliance in basically they provide technical support for their signatory nations. And so our role has been looking at, okay, what skills can we use from our different areas of expertise to support them and their signatory nations. And so that includes looking at different amounts of funding, different funding programs, where it's coming from, looking at different types of decision making and conservation, and that comes from our colleagues at UBC. And so we've been working together for 5 years now, and we've all built these really amazing collaborative relationships where we can draw upon each other's areas of expertise to move. Really, the focus is Fraser salmon populations are in a crisis. So how do we use collaboration to move from a crisis into recovery and resilience? So I think we tackle a lot of big systemic questions, but work together on them and move towards solutions. Every fall, I actually make art out of salmon carcasses, which may seem weird to some people because they're dead and slimy. But it's really, really fun. And I find it very, like, not only calming and almost meditative in a sense for me, but also really affirms why I work in conservation. So every fall I go down to a river where there's salmon spawning, and I use a post-spawning carcass as a print, or I make a print out of them. And so I, clean it and paint it, and then I make a rubbing using canvas of the salmon carcass. And each rubbing is different. It changes every year. It changes every time I do it, but sometimes, they turn out as just like blobs, but sometimes they turn out really well, and you can even like see each individual scale in the salmon. And so then I finish them and hang them up on the wall, and it's this really cool reminder of this particular fish that I made a print out of, because then that fish will decompose and feed, the aquatic and riparian ecosystem. It'll never be there again, but I've captured its life in this piece of art. And so I find it, it really fills me up in terms of just being there and spending time with the fish. Normally I'm the only one in the river besides the other animals that are there for salmon. But yeah, it's really like an important practice for me, just to kind of like get away from the computer, get away from the data, all these things that are very like up here, and just kind of spend time out on the land and be with the thing that I spend my time on. There's this perspective maybe that you have to be a scientist, or like, you have to have more technical expertise to be involved in conservation. But really, I think anyone can be involved. And if people can connect with something that is threatened or endangered, for example, through art, then it fosters that connection, which then enables protection. And so I think, I've made prints with kids before. I've gone into classrooms and we've gone to the local, river, and made prints with salmon, and they get to take that home and have that. And so they automatically start making that connection between like the land and their life and the home, which I think is super important. And so I think art has a huge role to play. Yeah, not only in connecting people, but also spreading messages and awareness. Whether it's through like a mural or art festival or any, like, I love art. And so I think it has a huge opportunity to support salmon conservation. If you are passionate about salmon, that's wonderful. But I find often young people, they really, really care, but they're not really sure where to start, or like what is really captures their attention. And so I would recommend just like spending time outside, find what makes you curious, like what makes you excited. And then based on that, kind of pursue different opportunities where you can get involved, whether it be through like volunteering for restoration or education days. I think organizations like Raincoast, we always can use voluntary support. And so if you are able to do that, then that's a wonderful way to get involved. It not only exposes you more towards the species you're focusing on, or just the ecosystem you are passionate about, but also the people working on it. And so, yeah, volunteering is a great way to do it. That's probably where it starts. And then from there, you can basically, I think what I found is once you get your foot in the door, like opportunity just kind of arise, because people can see that you're really passionate and want to be involved. So spend time outside, like spend time with people who are also passionate, and the help is always appreciated.